information which is actually used or provided to the expert. Now, that's sort of comprised of two categories I mentioned earlier. That is the context that I have with witnesses, attorneys, and people, and maybe the documents that I'm utilizing. And as we discussed in our underlying methodology, session, the discussion that we had when we were talking about what is the underlying basis in formulating your opinion. The session we talked about gathering that information. A natural flow from that is to drill down to, okay, what is every contact they had, not only with the people that may have rendered some helpful information. In other words, not only did the engineer talk to the testing company, but they might have had communications with the client, with the person, with somebody else. They might have written or read something. They might have created documents as a result of those conversations. I can either expand out the discussion of the underlying methodology, or as I've done it here, break it into a different section of contact with people and documents provided. Now, how do I ask about that? What's the purpose? I want to know every person that they've talked to. Every person that has provided something to them in the form of a communication, a written document, a ride to somewhere, a nonverbal, pointing at something, whatever that case may be. I want to learn what documents not only they received from these people, what information, but what did they evaluate? What did they look at on their own? Those standards, those methodologies on their own in deriving and helping them to understand what they're going to render as an opinion. Or how did they create the opinion itself? Was it done through writing? Was it done through a PowerPoint? Was it done through video? This session discusses how we ask those questions. Who did you speak to? In our last session, we talked about discussion with a particular, let's say a testing company, and you were an expert and you're finding out some testing analysis. Here we're talking about a contact with maybe a fact witness, a contact with somebody else, a lawyer. I want to know everything that was communicated between them and the lawyer. Now there are certain privileges that come into play that might, not always, but might impact something called a work product privilege. But let's assume for this discussion that you're allowed to ask and inquire in those areas, at least in some way. I want to know how many contacts you had with that witness, with that lawyer, with that other expert, with that friend. I want to know what was communicated in those contexts. I want to know everything that you said and they said. I want to see every document, every email, every piece of correspondence, and I want to systematically go through each one and understand why they wrote them, why they received it, how it was important, or how it wasn't important. Whether it was disregarded, why it was disregarded, whether that triggered other information, whether that contact helped them in some other way. Maybe they called it was just a scheduling issue. It had nothing to do with rendering their opinion, but you find out they talked to somebody. And maybe when you talk to that person, you might find out something about their personality. They made a side comment that this was a joke, or that there's no way there was damage to that person on the phone. Who knows? But the concept is I want to learn to make sure I understand not necessarily everything that they relied upon, but also every contact that was made, whether they relied upon it or not. So you can understand I want to go through systematically all of that information. I want to break it into groups of people, documents, other things, what occurred systematically, one by one, surgically going through and exhausting every area to make sure I understand that I've covered everything. Documents. They might have created a document that didn't necessarily help them to formulate their opinion or they don't think it did, or they're testifying it did. Maybe it was a picture of the structure. It was just helping them to remember something, or it was a guide, and for whatever reason, they didn't testify in the earlier section that they relied upon it. I want to understand those kinds. What documents are they producing today that are going to help you to understand what they relied on? What documents did they produce before that? Maybe through a discovery request that will enable you to understand what they did include or why they didn't include something or why they included something. I included a copy of the insurance policy. Well, aren't you an engineer? Yes. Well, why'd you do that? Well, I include everything that's given to me. And then later on you find out they didn't include everything. Or they say that, and then that tells you that not everything that is here is going to be relevant. So let's go through and make sure we understand which items he thinks or she thinks is relevant, which ones aren't. It doesn't matter what they say. If I am subpoenaing that person, or I'm giving a notice to a party, if I am dealing with an expert, and I've asked them to produce documents, this might be an opportune time to take out that document request if I haven't done it at the very beginning and say, okay, let's look at everything I asked for and first see if you produced it. And I go item by item. And I ask them to identify which documents respond to which request number I have. And I take out that subpoena that I gave them, or that ducis tecum, that bring the document set of items I want them to bring, and I go through them. And I explain, okay, tell me about each item and what you produced, or why you didn't produce something. Why didn't you think that this was necessary in order to render an opinion? Well, I never used that. Okay. I didn't bring any treatises because I didn't look at any treatises. Okay, I didn't look at any authoritative sources, so I didn't bring any. Well, that might tell you something about how valid is their opinion. Okay, maybe valid, but it may be attackable. The concept is, I am going through and systematically understanding everything that was either brought to me or used by them or just read or considered, even if they didn't use it in formulating their opinion. That's the concept of asking questions based around either contacts with people or what documents they received or produced. And like the other sessions, the key is to understand that I'm going to take baby steps. Okay, how many times did you speak to that lawyer? 7, I don't remember. What would help you to remember? Well, my bills would show you that. Okay, let's go through your bill. Please look at your bill that's marked as defendant's number 1, plaintiff's number 1, whatever, and tell me how many conversations it reflects that you had with Attorney Smith, with Witness Jones. They go through. Is there any other document, note, or item that could possibly show any other communication that you might have had that wasn't reflected on that bill? See the exhaustion technique? I don't care what they say. But you can see that I'm exhausting it. Use the same principles to make sure I have jumped through each one. Okay, let's take the first item, or the most relevant one, or the last item, or however you want to proceed. The key is to understand that I'm going to be systematic, I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to gather all the information from each conversation, from each meeting, from each conference. Okay, you produced this document. Okay, I might mark the document. Tell me how you used that document. I didn't use it. Okay, why did you produce it? Because you said to produce it. Okay, I did use that document. Okay, how did you use it? They go through and explain. You do your exhaustion technique. Okay, so in addition to using it for this and this purpose, is there any other purpose you use it for? No, yes. Okay, let's talk about how that helped you to formulate your opinion and have them explain it. What specific parts of that document did you use? When you talk to your lawyer, how did the information that you secured from that lawyer or that witness help you in formulating your opinion? I didn't ask them what their opinion was. I asked them how it helped them. It didn't help me. It did help me. It helped me in this part. If they go through 8 conversations and say nothing helped them, so I want to make sure I understand your testimony. You are testifying that you spoke to the lawyer on 8 occasions and there wasn't a single word that they told you that you found relevant or that you considered in rendering your opinion. It's tough for them to say, That's true. So if they say it is, great. If they say it's not, okay, well, let's go back and make sure, because I don't want to misunderstand you. I don't want to think that I heard something I didn't hear. Let's talk about what words, what phrases, what suggestions. I want to know whether or not somebody actually suggested something. By learning, if they say, I don't remember what he said, and they don't remember anything that's going to help them remember, then I might lead them. I might say, well, did the lawyer ask you what your opinion was? I'm not asking for the opinion. I asked if they asked him if he had an opinion or she had an opinion. Yes, no. Okay, did the lawyer ask you to tell them your opinion on the phone? Or at that time, did you have a final opinion? Did you need any other documentation before you gave that opinion? Well, yes, I gave them a preliminary opinion, but I told them it was only based on what I looked at so far. I needed additional documents. Okay, what additional documents do you remember? Now all of a sudden they remember things. You see what I've done? I've just made sure I've exhausted them. I've just made sure I've gone through that. And I've gone through that technique of making sure that I understand everything that's associated with their opinion. Every person, every document, every item, everything they did or did not do. Everything they considered or didn't consider. By doing that, you're exhausting that area and gaining a lot of knowledge about the formulation of their opinion and what information, people, or items they use.